Hardcore college football fans, dig in because you're going to love this. Here on Mark Rogers TV over the next few weeks, we're going to be comparing the conferences. We're going to break down each BCS league against its non-conference opponents, 2012, 2013, in particular the bowl games, but the entire slate. How dominant were the wins, how bad were the losses, and everything in between. How tough were these opponents? Okay, let's start with the SEC. We know that the SEC is the best, but by how much over the second best league? The SEC went 6-3 in bowl play, of course, culminated by the BCS National Championship win, Alabama 42, Notre Dame 14. How good were the Irish? They came in ranked number 1, 12-0. They beat Stanford, they beat BYU, Pitt, Oklahoma, Michigan State, and USC. The really good wins were against Stanford, certainly. Top 6 or 7 team in the country. Notre Dame won that on a controversial goal line play in overtime. They barely got by BYU by 3 points at home. Pitt missed a field goal, or the Panthers, with 7 losses eventually, would have defeated Notre Dame. They got by the Panthers in 3 overtimes. Michigan threw 5 picks, otherwise Notre Dame loses that game at home. So Notre Dame, we credit them for winning close games, but they were not the second or third best team in the country. They were maybe the 8th or 10th best team in the land. Alabama won that game over Notre Dame by 28. We give them a dominance factor of 8.5 on a scale of 1 to 10 in defeating the Irish. And of course, Bama's other significant non-conference win, a big one over Michigan, 41-14. So Bama over Notre Dame and Michigan non-conference. Probably the second best team in the SEC, Georgia, winning over Nebraska in bowl play 45-31. Nebraska came in at 10-2, actually at 10-3 after losing the Big Ten championship game. The Huskers, a top 25 caliber team. Not a team that should have been playing the second, third, or fourth best team in the country. The Huskers lost by 25 to Ohio State. They lost to Wisconsin by 39. They were the second seed in the Big Ten, but again, should not have been playing Georgia. That said, the Huskers gave them a game. They led in the fourth quarter. Georgia turned it on in the final 10 minutes, won the game, so the dominance factor for Georgia over Nebraska, only 5, because the Bulldogs, certainly the better team, but the Huskers came to play. That was a really good football game, and the Huskers squeaked by in their wins against their better opponents, Penn State-Northwestern and Michigan State, winning at the gun. So this was not the second best team in the Big Ten. Georgia wins at 45-31. The Bulldogs' only other significant, somewhat significant non-conference win over Georgia Tech, 42-10, but the Yellow Jackets finished at 6-6. Okay, the big downer for the SEC, here it is in the Sugar Bowl. Louisville 33, Florida 23. Gators were a 13 or 14-point favorite in this game, and Louisville, they dominated from the kickoff on. That early interception really propelled them to a big win in this one. Okay, Louisville came in at 10-2, ranked 21st in the country, and that's about where they should be placed, because if you look at the schedule, they really defeated no one of note. Rutgers, Cincinnati, 2 very close wins, probably the most significant wins for Louisville on the schedule. They dominated no one, and they got blasted by Syracuse. So Louisville wins the best or the worst BCS league in the country. They showed up on New Year's night, though, against Florida at the Sugar Bowl, 33-23, and we give Louisville a dominance factor of 7. So big blow to the SEC here. Florida losing to the worst conference champion in Louisville, 33-23. But Florida had that huge non-conference win late in the season against Florida State. So we have to credit them as well. At the Cotton Bowl, Texas A&M-Oklahoma, much anticipated game, close at half. But A&M poured it on in the second half, took the Sooners to task, 41-13. Sooners came in at 10-2, ranked 12th in the country. This Sooners team, look at the schedule, look at the teams they defeated barely in the Big 12, usually in shootouts. The Sooners were about the 20th best team in the country. So a nice win for Texas A&M, but for the 6th, 7th best team in the country defeating number 20, that's what you would expect. Oklahoma, again, tied for the Big 12 championship, but Kansas State, we saw what they did or did not do against Oregon, and Oklahoma's wins were in the 50s against some marginal teams in the Big 12. A&M also defeated out of conference Louisiana Tech, a nice 9-3 squad, and SMU, which turned around to beat Fresno State 43-10 in its bowl performance. Okay, another downer for the SEC here. LSU, about a 5-point favorite, loses against Clemson. They blow a 10-point fourth quarter lead, lose it to the Tigers 25-24 at the Chick-fil-A Bowl. Check out my post on this one. Les Miles blew this game for LSU. Tigers of LSU should have won it. Clemson came in at 10-2, 14th ranked in the country. Quality team, of course, with all sorts of speed and weapons on offense, but no significant wins for Clemson. They lost to Florida State. They lost to South Carolina. Their two big games of the season. They lost them. Their other SEC opponent was Auburn, which, of course, got trashed in conference. Clemson only beat them by a touchdown. The second best team in the ACC, taking on about the fifth best team in the SEC, and Clemson does win it, so credit them 25-24, a loss for LSU, whose other significant non-conference opponent was Washington at home. Tigers won that one 41-3, but the Huskies, of course, maybe a top 40 team in going 7-6. Okay, Mississippi State-Northwestern. Wildcats win it 34-20. Northwestern came in at 9-3, the fifth seed in the Big Ten at 5-3. Lost three really close games down to the wire against Penn State, Michigan, and Nebraska. Otherwise, Northwestern may have gone undefeated. To Northwestern's credit, they had the best out-of-conference performance for any Big Ten squad in defeating Vanderbilt and Syracuse. A very good Vandy team Northwestern defeated, and they beat Mississippi State as well, 34-20. Dominance factor of 6 for Northwestern, and the Wildcats finished at 10-3. Mississippi State played nobody in their regular season non-conference slate, as usual in Starkville. Ole Miss impressively over Pitt, 38-17. Dominance factor here of 7 for the Rebs as they pulled out early, dominated Pitt. Pitt came in at 6-6, defeated Virginia Tech, a decent team that lost 6 games actually for the Hokies. And of course, we noted Pitt could have won at South Bend against Notre Dame in 3 overtimes. So a decent win for Ole Miss by 21 over Pitt. Ole Miss's other significant non-conference showing was against Texas, and it was not a showing for the Rebs. They lost early in the season, 66-31, got blown out by the Longhorns. But of course, Ole Miss much better late in the season and capped it off against Pitt, 38-17. Okay, Vandy and North Carolina State. We know the Commodores won that one 38-24 at the Music City Bowl. NC State, a top 40 team, not a great win. NC State at 7-5. They did have the one significant win over Florida State. They lost to Tennessee, a 5-7 SEC team, 35-21. So Vandy wins at 38-24, dominance factor of 6 here. Vandy's other significant non-conference opponent, we just mentioned, they lost to Northwestern 23-13. South Carolina, Michigan in the best matchup, one of the best matchups of the bowl season, one of the best games. South Carolina wins it on virtually the last play of the game, 33-28 over Michigan. Michigan, definitely the best, by far, the best 5-loss team in the country. They got blasted by Bama, but shoot, they held Notre Dame to 13 points on the road. They barely lost this game against a South Carolina team that was about the 8th or 9th best team in the country. Michigan also took Ohio State to the wire, 26-21 in Columbus. So Michigan, a very strong team, one of the 15 or 20 best teams in the country. South Carolina wins this one 33-28, and they finish, of course, 11-2, and they also beat Clemson. That's a quality win, of course, again for the SEC over Clemson. So your dominance factor total for the SEC is a plus 21.5 in bowl play. Overall, the SEC against the other 5 BCS leagues went 14-9. 3-2 against the Big Ten. We pretty much went over those games. 6-2 against the ACC. A lot of games between the SEC and the ACC. The Big 12, the SEC split 2 games against the Big 12. Against the Pac-12, the SEC went 2 for 2. Of course, they beat Notre Dame in the one game in the championship game. And against the Big East, the shocker of shockers, the SEC went 1-4 against the Big East. But this is why we break it down and just don't go by the record. What were those games? Well, Rutgers tied for the Big East championship. They beat Arkansas, maybe the 10th or 11th best team in the SEC. So those 2 teams shouldn't be comparable. as well. Louisville tied for the Big East Championship. They beat Kentucky, maybe the worst team in the SEC. Likewise, Syracuse, the other champion in the Big East, beat Missouri. Missouri won one game in the SEC. So you can't really count those wins, except the huge one in the Sugar when Louisville beat Florida. So you got to break down and really look at the opponents, look at the closeness of the games. Again, Bama defeats Notre Dame 42-14, laid them to waste, dominant fashion. That's a significant win. That meant everything. South Carolina, Michigan maybe helped the prestige of the Big Ten in losing to South Carolina, a team that's probably one of the 6 or 8 best teams in the country on the last play of the game. So got to break down more than just the results and the records. How did these teams compete on the field? All right, that's our take on the SEC in bowl play and non-conference play in 2012-2013. Now, we have to hear from you on the SEC comparing these conferences on Mark Rogers TV.